Start recording. Again, thank you again for joining us. We're going to be presenting on school communication priorities in an emergency. Again, my name is Alex Hayslip, Program Manager for SSEM at ODE. And we'll get into it with the agenda, we're going to be looking at. So first, we're going to be talking about emergency communication, what it is, what the subject matter is before we dive into some of the other specifics. And we're going to talk about the requirements, actually what is required of schools and districts across the state, and then what our actual recommendations are, because the requirements threshold is somewhat low, but there are some recommendations we have that are going to make you better prepared. Some additional things that we think you all should consider for emergency communications. So, and then following that, we're going to talk about communication and response priorities, where you should nest some of those tasks that involve communication within the actual response to an emergency or disaster. And we'll talk about post-event communication, which really is the focus of the actual requirements for schools and districts. And we'll use an example scenario to kind of talk through what should go into that communication so that it's succinct to the point and gets folks moving in the direction of maintaining safety and security for students and staff. And then we'll finish up with a discussion and Q&A. I like to keep these sessions between 30 and 45 minutes, so we have some time at the end for Q&A or discussions or requests for assistance. And so we'll leave that time as we normally do here at the end. So first of all, emergency communication. What does that mean for schools and districts, right? When we encounter disaster, we want to have a plan for how to respond to any disaster, but that's going to require communications from the very beginning of setting off that alarm or that alert inside the school to the resolution after getting students back to the families. We want to make sure that we're exercising those plans so that we're not surprised by them ahead of time. And that's what we're going to be talking about with some of the recommendations we have. So when disaster strikes, we want to make sure we're setting conditions for safety, how we're communicating to folks inside the building and outside the building, be that with first responders, be that with district staff or other members of the community, families, such that might need to know, hey, what just happened and what does this mean for my student at the school? And then as the situation's resolved, we need to make sure we're notifying others of what happened and what to do. But why? Why do we need to do these things? The first thing, when we're talking about the actual response priorities, when we're setting those conditions, we're notifying folks in the building, that's to set those conditions for safety. We want to make sure everybody's safe. But skipping all the way to the end, why do we need to notify? Why do we have those requirements for notifying families and staff of an emergency or response that just happened? A number of reasons. One, again, setting additional conditions for safety. Maybe there was a situation where we had to relocate or reunify. Those folks need to know where they're going to go, what alternate location they're going to go to pick up their student following the emergency. Other reasons, big reasons for this, rumor control. A lot of times rumors start spreading, getting out of control. Folks don't know they don't have an official communication from the school or district on what just happened. And if they don't have that, a lot of times those rumors can get out of control. We want to make sure we're avoiding that at all costs, because then that causes more headaches for our staff, teachers, families, etc. So we want to make sure we're being upfront and clear in our communications from the beginning of a response all clear through the end and after it's been resolved to maintain that safety across the board. So another good reason for the why, there are requirements for it. Again, there is the requirement of providing electronic communication to parents and guardians as soon as possible, but no later than 24 hours after the safety action begins. So any of those standard response protocols that you have to enact any of them. We need to send out emergency communication to parents and guardians as soon as possible. Now, in the statute, it does say as soon as possible, but no later than 24 hours. I would recommend as soon as possible, because if you're waiting 24 hours, that rumor mill starts circulating, even if it's a very simple response to a very minor incident. That rumor mill starts churning up, and they're saying, "Why didn't the school do the X, Y, or Z? Why didn't we get information on what just happened?" And those things can take on a beast of themselves, right? So in the statute, we also have actual requirements what that communication must include. Now, has to have a general description of the issue. What happened to cause your school to go into that lockdown, secure, shelter in place, evacuation? What was the impetus for that situation? We also need to know when it started and when it ended. So a clear timeline from what happened to when it was resolved, actions that you took to resolve the situation. Did you put the school into lockdown? Did you evacuate? What was done? What other actions were taken at the school or by the school to make sure that you're protecting the students inside the school? And really that's what families are going to be looking for more than anything else in there. What did my school do to make sure that my student is safe? And then an explanation of how the situation resolved. Now, one point I would like to bring up here for the explanation of how the situation resolved component of that communication. A lot of times, maybe it's a minor incident that was resolved very quickly, and you were able to get back to school, and there's no real disruption to the day. Other situations may require the fire department, police to show up and take care of the situation. And if those kinds of situations happen, we should probably make sure that we're coordinating our communication with those other agencies, those other entities, so that they can say, hey, here's how it was resolved, at least as much as they can say if it was a criminal act or otherwise, or if it was a major fire or something like that. So, some things to think about, not only coordinating your communication within your school or district internally, but when you have other agencies involved, you want to make sure that we're coordinating some of that communication with those external partners as well. So, what is recommended though? We recommend you have a communication plan. It's often called a functional annex. And I'll ask Mitch Seckler, our state coordinator, to drop in the chat the functional annexes and emergency drills guidance document that we have that covers what functional annexes we recommend that you include in your emergency operations plan. And that also includes a communications annex or communication plan that you would act on during an emergency. And the reason we're recommending that is because it's not just post-event that we need to worry about communication. There are other components during the actual incident that we want to make sure that we have a well-established plan for communication during an incident. Now, what you see on the right here is a task list or a task sheet for like the incident command at a school level. These are fantastic for your emergency operations plan and those annexes to clearly identify what tasks are necessary and in what order for different roles during an emergency response. It'll simplify that process in case you have folks moving in and out of a role. Maybe the principal is not there that day, the assistant principal is taking over or otherwise. Do they know? Can they have a quick reference sheet for, oh no, an emergency just happened. What are my procedures? What do I need to work on and focus on immediately to set those conditions for safety? Something to keep in mind for that communication plan. And another thing I'll request, Mitch, is you put that communications annex and the other emergency communications document in the chat if you haven't already. But something to think about with that communications plan is we're making sure that we have that consistent, reliable information flow between all parties both inside the school and outside the school. Obviously, we need to make sure that our students and staff are notified of the emergency, but also school officials. We probably want to make sure the district knows what just happened and why you're going into a lockdown or secure or other standard response protocol. Emergency responders. This should be an obvious one, right? Emergency just happened. We want to make sure we're dialing 911 as soon as possible. And then families in the broader community, they need to know, hey, is the release time, is the pickup time changed, or is it different now because of this emergency? Was there no disruptions? Was there a disruption? What was the disruption? They need to know what happened so that they can respond accordingly too. And you should provide communication and have plans in place ahead of time so that we know how to communicate with those folks and give them the necessary information so that they can act. Remember, a well-developed communication plan helps minimize that confusion. And really, we should be focusing on making sure that we're providing that efficient, that effective emergency response so we're maintaining safety for everybody. All right, so from the beginning, priority always goes to the immediate threat or hazard. We need to make sure that we're setting those conditions by enacting those protocols that we have in the SRP first and foremost, because that's what's going to keep our folks safe. Those are the things, those are those response protocols that are going to make sure that our students and staff are safe in the interim before the emergency responders show up. So what is our plan for communicating with students and staff in the building or on school grounds, first and foremost, to make sure that we're setting those conditions first? We're saying, I have that bullet in here, coordinating immediate response to the incident, the PA system, other internal alert capabilities. Really, I want you to think about those spaces on your campus that might have dead zones in the PA system or out in the practice field or other places on campus that might not get that immediate notification. How are you planning to make sure that students and staff in those areas are notified should a major event occur that requires them to respond to it? All right. Do you have walkie-talkies? Do you have other means of communicating with them that can, let them know, hey, the response is occurring. We need to set those conditions for safety, lock down or go secure or whatever the response is. Once that situation or those conditions for safety have been established, we're calling 911. We want to do that very quickly and immediately after setting those conditions. So we're thinking about we have a situation, we'll just make one up here. If you have a situation where you have a accident or some other kind of major fire or something outside the school, we're going to set the conditions by calling a secure protocol. We're going to get everybody inside, lock the outside doors so they're not going out and potentially being harmed by the accident or fire that is outside of school grounds. And we're going to call 911 because we want to make sure that they can come here and handle it quickly so that it doesn't spill onto campus and cause further issues for the safety of the school campus. And then once those conditions are set, we're going to make sure school leaders know how to manage that response afterwards and to communicate that information to the district. Are there other capabilities that the school alone doesn't have to complete the response? Maybe reunification is going to be needed because now that fire has encroached onto the school grounds and we need to evacuate to the south practice field and move to a different location to reunify because now it's not even safe for families to show up to pick up their kids. So how are we managing that situation throughout the life cycle of the response? Again, that's what this is for here. We're setting those conditions with the standard response protocol, and our website will have the links at the end as well that cover what is in the SRP and how it should be applied to your school. Now, something to note here in Oregon right now this year, we still have the requirement for a secure, or a lockout if you're still using the old language, lockdown, shelter, evacuate, and then the earthquake and tsunami if you happen to live in a tsunami hazard zone. Next year, the hold protocol is added to the requirements for emergency plans and drills. And the change there is going to be that during the course of the year next year, you're conducting one drill on each of those 5 protocols and no change to the earthquake or tsunami evacuation drills. So next year you'll have to have a drill during the school year, at least one on hold, shelter, secure, evacuate, lockdown, and then the same thing applies next year for the earthquake and tsunami. So everyone has to do 2 earthquake drills, and if you live in a tsunami evacuation zone, that's 3. What does that mean by setting the communications for the conditions for safety? So you identify the standard response protocol that will make you most safe during the incident that occurs. So for that situation where we have that fire outside school grounds, we're calling a secure because we need to get folks inside the building to make them safe from the incident that happens outside. Remember, you're not putting out the fires, arresting the bad guy. You're setting those conditions first so that then you can call 911 and ask them to come out and take care of the situation. So remember, first thing is communicate that response protocol. Again, keeping in mind those areas that you might have dead spaces or other communication challenges within your school grounds. Once those conditions are set, you're calling for help. Remember, the longer we're waiting to call 911, the longer it's going to take them to show up and help resolve the situation. Again, going to that situation where there's a fire or other accident just outside the main gate or outside the school grounds, we've called secure. We shouldn't just think, hey, it's not my problem, it's outside. You're responding to a situation. Call 911 immediately because if that fire or that incident, whatever it is you're responding to, escalates, you're going to wish they had left 5 minutes earlier than had you called them as immediately after setting those conditions. So something to keep in mind is respond to the incident, call for help, and then continue that response. So who else needs to know? We're going to start moving into the actual post event, that emergency communications component of it. But once you set those conditions, you know help's on the way. Who are we contacting next? And the reason we're specifically identifying district leadership after saying set the conditions and call 911 is even calling 911 is an extension of setting those conditions. Then you call the district leadership for accountability, for assistance with those other areas that the school alone cannot provide that response capability to. Additional communication, that coordination with the responders. Remember, like I said just a moment ago about major incident occurs where maybe a crime took place or a fire got out of hand, those agencies are going to have their own reports and their own communication. Don't talk about those things in your communication without making sure you've coordinated with them. A lot of times, district capabilities, if you have those plans in place already, will have a plan to coordinate that communication with those folks ahead of time so that you're all on the same page. There's no school giving information about the fire and fire department giving information about the fire as well without talking to each other. And then obviously that transportation reunification component, we need additional support, additional folks to come out and help with that. And in that process, we need to be thinking about parents and guardians. How are they being notified about what just happened? If there is a reunification, relocation, reunification that's required for an incident, they're going to need to know pretty quickly. And even if it's something minor, everybody evacuated because there was a toaster fire in the break room. They still need to know, hey, what just happened and what is this situation? Is there an early release now? Do we are there adjusted pickup times for that? There are adjusted transportation concerns with respect to, hey, I can't pick up my kid from the usual pickup spot. We have to go to the south lot because there are fire trucks there. Make sure you have that communication queued up and ready to go ahead of time. So what we mean by taking a continuing response is taking accountability as feasible. If you had an evacuation, we get everybody out of the building. For that example we were talking about just a second ago about going into secure, did everybody get inside and behind a locked door? Were you able to continue as normal inside a secured perimeter? Or do we still have somebody out on the playground because we didn't have a plan in place to contact that that class that's out there? So as you're setting those conditions, you've called 911, you've notified staff. We need to continue that response throughout the process until the issue is resolved. So what other actions are necessary to make sure that everybody's safe? And then again, going back to that example of a secure because there's a fire or other thing outside, has it escalated now? And do we need to continue response by evacuating and calling for a relocation and reunification of students and staff elsewhere? So make those decision points after making sure that you've set the conditions for safety, initiated that response, that you've not called 911, you have the cavalry on the way, and that you've notified other folks as necessary, district staff or otherwise. So things are de-escalating. Everyone's accounted for. Danger is past. The fire department said, you know what? Just stop cooking quesadillas in the toaster oven. Everybody's back inside. How are we communicating with parents and families, just parents and guardians following the incident? In a lot of cases, if it's a minor incident, we probably still just want to let them know, here's what happened and how it was resolved. And tomorrow is going to be the same usual school day as it was today, except without the toaster fire. But if it's something more serious, we need to be thinking about how are we making sure that folks know where they need to go and what they need to do to take their student home safely. So you lifted the response protocol, or you reunify, or you're going to reunification site, and you want to return to normal operations. This is this next section we're going to be talking about the emergency communication that is required. So a quick review before we go into the post-event or late event communication. Announce that necessary SRP. That standard response protocol is a hold, secure, lockdown, evacuate, or shelter. What are the steps we need to do to make sure that we're setting those conditions for safety in the building first? Call 911. Get the cavalry on the way. The longer we wait for that, the longer it's going to take for them to be able to put out the fire or handle the crime that is causing the concern for safety in the first place. Continue the necessary response. Notify the district office of the event. Again, if the situation that's starting to escalate, you need additional resources. Also, it's probably important to let the head office know, right? Take accountability of all students and staff. Decide on further action necessary to maintain the safety of the school. And then follow the district communication and notify parents and guardians on what's happening. That's that requirement component of, hey, what just happened? When did it happen? When was it resolved? What did you do to make sure that my student was safe, etc. So now we'll go into the emergency communication guide itself. And this message template is inside this document. And it'll take you through from top to bottom what that required emergency communication is and how we recommend laying it out. I'll go through this line by line in here. Some are going to be a little bit brief, some not as much, but you'll get a good sense of how to fill this out. Now, again, our recommendation is to have these templates filled out for various types of scenarios or emergencies that you might encounter. And keep in mind the population you're sending it to. Do you need to translate? Do you need to have some pre-translated messages or other templates ahead of time? Have some of these pre-filled out so you're not scrambling to get the information out when it's immediately needed, especially for something like a reunification that's going to require, hey, I need you to go to the fairgrounds right now to go through the line to pick up your kid. You don't want to be scrambling to think, oh shoot, how am I going to write this message when time is of the essence. Now, if you have something like the messaging template we have here, if you are caught in a bind, it is such a dynamic situation that you need to write something from scratch. This should help guide you through that process immediately. Again, we'll talk about this in by line here in a second. But if you have those templates ahead of time, it will help save those situations where you're scrambling to get a message out the door when you absolutely need to make sure that you're getting that communication to the parents and guardians. So we'll say, suppose this happens. We're not going to be talking about a fire outside the school grounds anymore, but let's use a scenario that is reasonably complex that we can use to talk about the various components of the message as we're recommending you structure it. Because with something like this, you'll get a better sense of what is important for each section so that it makes more sense if you have to deal with a much less complex issue. So let's say, and this is all fictitious, there's no real event here or reference to a real thing. So let's say an earthquake caused structural damage to Happy Valley High School, minor injuries to a few students. School went into an unscheduled shelter in place, followed by an evacuate protocol. Parents and guardians need to know what happened. So obviously, this is a pretty major event. It's going to have a lot of parents and guardians, even folks inside the building, probably pretty scared. Communication early is going to help settle some nerves on this one too, and help direct traffic as needed. But we're going to throw a wrench in the works. There's a rumor that's been circulating that claims a collapsed wing has trapped survivors, but everyone's safely evacuated. No such collapse occurred. How do you address those things in your communication? We'll go from the top. With the introduction component, this is where you're going to answer that what happened, when did it happen, why. Those are the components of what did the school or what was the incident and what did the school essentially do initially. So a recommendation here, keep this one short and to the point. We just want to know, hey, what happened? I'm going to give you additional details in the following sections, but this should just say, here an earthquake happened, here's what we did. So the example sentence here, 1 to 2 sentences, you can expand on this a little bit, but try to keep that introductory notice a little bit shorter. Happy Valley High School conducted a shelter in place, followed by an evacuation in response to the earthquake experienced at 9:06 this morning. Sweet and to the point. The next section is going to expand on this and give more detail about what happened inside the building or what you need to do, etc. So additional information. That next section is going to answer the what does this mean? What does this mean for me as a parent or guardian? What does this mean for my student that I'm now panicked about at this school because I heard there's a collapsed wing? Is it my kid? We're probably not going to answer the rumor control portion yet, but we do need to provide some additional details on what does this mean? When was the incident concluded? And what was the outcome? This is the part where we're going to have some additional background information that's going to help them make sense of this situation. So the example here, again, you can expand on this. Students have been relocated to the High Plains Fairgrounds because the school grounds are unsafe for occupancy. 3 students were escorted to the hospital for treatment of minor injuries and observations. The families of those students are being notified. So, escorted to the hospital for treatment of minor injuries and observation. That doesn't make me feel totally comfortable yet, but I'm going to get some additional, if I'm reading this as a parent or guardian, I'm going to get some additional information in this next section that's going to tell me what I need to do. And that's the action items. And one thing I want to stress here with the action items for you, if you're writing up your templates or you're thinking about as you're conducting your drills throughout the year and you want to start practicing, incorporating practice for communication into your drills, think about the action items. What should be put in here and how should you format it to make sure it's drawing the eye? If I'm reading that introductory section where I see, hey, an earthquake happened, we've evacuated everybody. The one thing I want to make sure that I'm drawing the eye to the person who's maybe panicked or stressed in this situation is the action item section. This is where I recommend putting the actual actions necessary in bold, underlining them, putting them in bullets. What we don't want to do is we don't want to bold or underline or bullet everything in the message. Be specific with how you're formatting some things in like bold or underline or in bullets because you want it to be the section or those specific pieces of information that you need to make sure are the action items for your audience, for your parents and guardians. This is an important one because if we bolded or underlined other sections before this, it might be confusing as to what action I need to take if, like in this instance, all parents and guardians should go to the High Plains Fairgrounds and park in the north lot. That's sweet, that's short, that's to the point. Again, you could bullet this section and provide some here are the steps you needed to take to get there or check in at this location. You can provide some additional information there in the action item section. But the important thing here I want to stress again is don't over bullet your messages like this, and don't over bold things. I know we always think some things are super important, but the action items should be deliberately stressed because this is the thing that you want to make sure that they're doing right now. So we're expanding on this a little bit. We're going to say emergency responders and school staff will be there to direct traffic so they understand, hey, when I get there, I'm going to get additional um, direction, and they're going to reunify with your child as quickly as possible. So I know, hey, some semblance of control is had here. I can trust that if I get to the north lot, they're going to direct me to where I need to go. We've got those components in place. We want to make sure we're addressing rumor control, or if there's other further messaging that you want to provide. Maybe there's change to a policy that's going to result from this, or there's some other kind of thing that you want to say, hey, this made us rethink how we're evacuating. We're not going to evacuate the north route. Whatever it is, this rumor control further messaging section, this is where we want to put that information. It's normally an add-on to our immediate communication and telling folks what just happened and what actions they need to take first. Those are the important components. Now we're addressing additional things that might be circulating or going around. So for this, we know that there was that rumor that there was the collapse wing, trapped some students. So we'll address that directly here. And we'll say all students and staff have been accounted for. We can expand on this further and say all staff have been accounted for with minor injuries, and reiterate what we said in that additional information section about those parents and guardians are being notified directly. And or or even better yet, they've already been notified if you've already gone through that notification process. So with rumor control, it's important to address those things directly. Don't hedge around and try to obfuscate anything. Be honest with what just happened. If it was a mistake, it's much easier to admit that here than it is to say, oh, we just like keeping people safe and ignore what rumors are circulating. So again, be honest with this section if it's something that needs to be addressed. If it's something where, like in this particular situation, we're reunifying, there isn't immediate action necessary. Some of those things maybe we talk about in follow-on messaging and later dates. But for here, be straight and to the point about any kind of rumor control or further messaging you might have for folks right now. And this is kind of the important part, that follow-up, necessary contact information. Do you have a resource page? Do you have a contact information for a particular need or resource? Do you need to direct folks to other lines of communication? Maybe the district website is down because your servers were in the break room where the toaster fire occurred. How are you directing information flow for folks to stay up to date on what happened, right? This is where you want to have those links and those phone numbers at the bottom so they can quickly reference that as necessary. So things to keep in mind. We'll go for a review here right after this. But be honest in your communication. Try not to avoid talking about something that happened that you didn't like, even if it's a situation that it was out of your control. Be honest in the communication that you're providing parents and guardians. It will come back to bite you every time if you're not being honest in those communications at the time, because there's going to be heightened concerns surrounding any kind of emergency or disaster event. If we're being honest in our communications now, it'll go a long way to bridging those those concerns later on. Avoid speculation, breach of confidentiality. This is kind of a two-parter here, but we're talking about don't say, well, I think the police got the guy, and it was little Johnny from Mrs. Beach's class, second grade Mrs. Beach's second grade class. Don't provide personally identifiable information or anything that's going to breach FERPA or otherwise in your communication. So for the example we just went through, you can say, hey, 3 students were injured. They went to the hospital. We don't need to provide the names of those folks or the families or anything like that. And again, don't speculate in the communication here. Don't provide that extra information that could, again, come back to bite you if you're providing extraneous information that is not useful for what just happened and how do I get my kid home safe sections. Consider all community members. Again, we talked about it a little bit towards the beginning of this, but if you know you have folks who speak different languages, make sure you have mechanisms in place for translation during the event, because again, they're all going to need to know exactly where to go and what to do to pick up their kid. And then stay calm, follow your procedures, avoid jargon and acronyms. Pretty simple one. We see this quite a lot, but every school, every education institutions, you all have acronyms. We all have acronyms. Use them all the time. Don't expect parents and guardians or other community members to know exactly what you're talking about with those. Spell those out first, and even err on the side of just spelling them out all the time as you're going through your communications. So, final review for the second part: communicate early and often. I recommend beginning of the year, send out a communication. Hey, we're going to follow up with you as soon as any major event happens. Here's our protocols, and here's how we conduct ourselves if we have to respond to an emergency. You communicate early and often with folks. You're going to build that trust that is necessary for them to believe, hey, you actually do have the safety of my student in mind. You're going to have much fewer problems or complications further on down the road. Have those templates ready to use before they're needed. And like I said, have some kind of fill in the blank template section like what we recommend in the guidance ready to go too, because you're not always going to have a template for every single or pre-filled template for every single scenario or situation. Make sure you have other means to make sure you can pivot as needed in a dynamic situation. Practice those emergency communication procedures. We talked about the component of exercising our plans and incorporating even some of those communication procedures into our drills as well. How are you doing that? Are you seriously looking at your review of, we just conducted an emergency evacuation. Did everybody inside the building understand where we all needed to go? And did we make sure we don't actually call 911 if it's a drill, but did we practice, hey, at this point now we can safely call 911 because we've set those conditions. So practice those emergency communications procedures even in something as simple as a drill. Then initial communication, again, to review. If you're hitting each of these sections here, you're going to meet the requirements and you're going to go above and beyond because you're going to be providing those parents and guardians with exactly what they need, actionable information, and you're going to be answering those questions that everybody's going to be having immediately during a disaster. Introduction: what happened, when it happened, why? What does this mean? What does it mean for me as a parent or guardian? What does it mean for my student that I'm concerned or panicked about? What should we do next? Where do we go? How do we pick them up? Is there alternative pickup times now? Are you sending kids home right now? Rumor control, further messaging, those are always going to happen. Have a means of addressing those as they come up, and then have that follow-up section where you're saying, make sure if you need additional information, we're going to provide updates and communication on this and other incidents at this location, here, and here, and what our follow-up phone number is. So remember, we can stress anything. The purpose of any emergency plan is safety, making sure that you're setting those conditions for safety and that you're following procedures that are making sure you're maintaining safety throughout an incident. You want to make sure you're involving the entire community, all members of the school, including accounting for and accommodating students and staff with disabilities and those with access and functional needs. This is not a complete compendium of all our online resources, but it is a few. We'll have an email that is sent out after this presentation to everybody who's registered for this event. That's going to include the links we sent here, as well as links to our website and how to further contact us. So with that, we'll open it up for questions or discussion or requests for assistance. So I think we can probably stop recording here, Mitch.